Graveyards are supposed to be a place of rest, but not everything buried stays quiet. When the sun goes down and shadows cover the tombstones, you might find that some spirits still walk among the living. These are 3 terrifying true stories from people who learned why you should never linger in a graveyard after dark. Welcome to Mr. Dark Horror Stories. Tonight we bring you 3 real encounters from people who stepped into graveyards and came out haunted. If you love chilling ghost stories, subscribe and turn on the bell for weekly nightmares. Now, let's begin. Story 1. It was one of those cold, clear nights where the moon hung low in the sky, casting a pale silver light that made the world look almost unreal. The kind of night where shadows stretched long and sharp, folding over every surface like a blanket made of darkness. I was walking home with my friend Armin, both of us tired but in good spirits after a late-night gathering at a friend's house. The usual route would take us a good 20 minutes at least, but Armin, ever the thrill-seeker, suggested cutting through the old cemetery nearby. "Come on, it'll save us time," he said, grinning like the idea of sneaking through a graveyard was the most exciting thing ever. I hesitated, not just because cemeteries freaked me out, but because something about the place always felt wrong at night. The stories I'd heard, the tales whispered by older folks about restless spirits, unsettled souls, none of it made me eager to stroll between gravestones under the moonlight. But the shortcut was tempting, and I was tired, so I agreed, hoping to get it over with as fast as possible. We slipped through the rusty iron gates, the metal groaning softly behind us. The air inside was cooler than outside, carrying a damp, earthy smell, moss, wet stone, and something older, something harder to place. We switched on our phone flashlights and stepped carefully on the cracked, uneven path that wound through rows of graves. The night was unnervingly quiet. No cars, no distant voices, not even the usual chirping of insects. Just the faint sound of our footsteps and the occasional rustle of dry leaves in the breeze. We tried to keep our voices light, joking about ghosts and haunted tales, but even those jokes felt hollow in the eerie silence. As we walked deeper in, I felt my skin crawl. The shadows seemed to twist and lengthen, bending around the gravestones like dark fingers. The moonlight glinted off an old angel statue up ahead, its wings spread wide as if guarding something beneath it. Then I saw her. She stood right beside the statue, a little girl, no older than 7 or 8. At first I thought maybe she was a trick of the shadows, but there was no mistaking her shape. She had long, dark hair falling in tangled waves around her pale face, eyes large and dark, staring straight at us. Her dress was old-fashioned, like something from an era long gone, white but faded and stained with age. I froze. Armand's breath hitched beside me. Neither of us said a word, our eyes locked on the girl who didn't move, didn't blink. She just stood there, watching us like she was waiting for something. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure she could hear it. The air around us seemed to chill suddenly, and the night grew even quieter, as if holding its breath. "Hey," Armand finally whispered, stepping forward, voice unsteady but trying to sound calm. "Are you lost? Do you need help?" The girl's lips didn't move. Instead, she turned slowly and ran behind the angel statue. Her dress fluttered like a ghost's veil in the wind. We exchanged uneasy glances. Armin motioned to follow, and I nodded, trying to steady my shaking hands. We rounded the statue, expecting to find her waiting, or at least to hear her footsteps. But she was gone. The space behind the statue was empty except for a small patch of earth. I knelt down, shining my flashlight on the ground. There was no sign of disturbance, no footprints, only a gravestone half hidden under moss and ivy. I wiped away the moss with my fingers, revealing the carved name, Zara. Below it, the dates, 1898 to 1949. My blood ran cold. She died over 70 years ago, I whispered. Armin looked pale, eyes wide. We need to get out of here, now. But I couldn't look away from the grave. The stillness around it felt alive somehow, like it was holding its breath too. I had to know more. Wait, I said, voice trembling. Who was she? Back home, I couldn't shake the image of the girl from my mind. The pale face, the dark eyes, the way she had vanished behind the statue. I stayed up late digging through old records online and scrolling through local history forums. Zara's name kept coming up, a young girl from the neighborhood who had died tragically in the late 1940s. The stories were scarce, but one recurring thread was a sudden illness that took her before she reached adulthood. Some locals whispered about her spirit wandering the cemetery, never finding peace. The more I read, the more the pieces came together. The angel statue had been erected near her grave by her family, a symbol of mourning and protection. And on that night, we'd seen her ghost, standing there like she was waiting for someone. The idea sent a chill down my spine. But part of me was fascinated. What was she waiting for? Why had she appeared just to us? Days passed, but the feeling of being watched didn't leave me. I found myself drawn back to the cemetery, wanting answers but afraid of what I might find. Armin wasn't keen on returning, but after some convincing, he agreed to go back with me in the late afternoon, just before sunset. We wanted to see the angel statue in daylight, to understand what we'd seen in the dark. The cemetery looked different in the sun. The shadows were softer, the air warmer, but the feeling of sadness lingered, like a heavy weight pressing down on the rows of graves. We stood by the angel statue again, this time inspecting the grave carefully. The stone was cracked and worn, but the name Zara was still clear. I noticed fresh flowers laid nearby, delicate white lilies, almost too pristine for such a neglected place. Someone still visits her, I said quietly. Armin nodded. Maybe a family member? As we stood there, I noticed something strange. At the base of the statue was a small, faded photograph tucked between the stone and the earth. I picked it up gently. It was a black and white picture of a young girl, Zara, smiling shyly at the camera. She looked exactly like the girl we'd seen the night before, except alive, full of life. The photo felt heavy in my hands, and I slipped it into my pocket. That night, sleep was impossible. My mind replayed every moment, every detail, from the cold silence to the girl's wide eyes. And then I started dreaming. In my dream, I was back in the cemetery. The moon was high and the angel statue stood tall and bright. Zara appeared again, but this time she spoke. "Help me," she whispered, voice like the rustling of leaves. "Help you? How?" I asked, heart pounding. "My story is unfinished," she said. "I need to be heard." I woke up gasping, the weight of her words pressing on me. Over the next few days, I couldn't ignore the pull to uncover Zara's story. I began visiting the local archives and speaking to older residents, piecing together what had been lost. Zara's life had been brief and marked by hardship. Born into a poor family, she had fallen ill during a harsh winter and passed away before she could see her 10th birthday. Her parents had buried her in the small cemetery outside town, next to the angel statue her father had commissioned to protect her spirit. But there were rumors, unconfirmed whispers, about how Zara's death wasn't just illness. Some said she had been hiding from something, someone in her last days. Others claimed the family was haunted by misfortune after her passing. The more I learned, the more I felt the urgency in Zara's ghostly plea. One evening, unable to resist, Armin and I returned once again to the cemetery. This time I brought the photograph and a small notebook where I had written down everything I'd found. Standing by the angel statue, I spoke aloud, telling Zara's story, honoring her memory, and promising that she would no longer be forgotten. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the air shifted. The night grew colder, but not in a frightening way. It felt calm, peaceful. A faint breeze rustled the leaves, and for the first time I thought I saw a shadow lift from the grave. Zara was finally at rest. Since that night, the cemetery feels different to me. Less heavy, less silent. I no longer fear the angel statue or the graves around it. Sometimes when the moon is just right, I think I see a small figure watching from afar. A pale girl in an old dress, her dark hair flowing in the night breeze. But now I don't feel scared. Instead, I feel a quiet gratitude, knowing that I helped a lost soul find peace. And I'll never forget the night we met the girl by the angel statue. Story 2. Working the night shift at the city cemetery was supposed to be a quiet, predictable job. I was used to solitude and silence, the occasional rustle of animals, and the way shadows played tricks on your eyes in the dark. Most nights, I'd stroll through the rows of gravestones, checking fences and gates, making sure nothing was out of place. The cemetery itself was historic, older than most anyone around here cared to remember. Graves from the 1800s, worn marble, and crypts with names long forgotten by time. I liked the job. It paid well enough, and I appreciated the calm it offered. But one night changed all that. The mausoleum was an old stone building near the far end of the cemetery, built decades ago by some wealthy family whose name had faded into obscurity. It was massive and imposing, with iron gates locked tight most of the time. At night, it looked like a tomb guarding the dead from the living. I was doing my usual rounds when I first heard it, a banging sound coming from inside the mausoleum. At first, I thought maybe someone had broken in, vandals, teenagers looking for a thrill, or some pranksters trying to scare the groundskeeper. It wouldn't be the first time. But the banging was steady, like something or someone was pounding on the stone walls from inside. The air felt heavier as I approached. My flashlight's beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the chipped stone steps leading up to the iron gates. I jiggled the locked padlock, but the key worked smoothly, odd since it was supposed to be locked tight at all hours. I pushed the gates open slowly, the metal groaning with age. The banging stopped as soon as the door creaked open. I stepped inside, heart beating faster, nerves prickling at the back of my neck. The mausoleum's interior was cold, the air stale with the scent of dust and decay. Marble walls lined with crypts stretched out before me. Cold stone benches sat untouched, and the silence felt almost suffocating. Then I saw it. A single coffin sat on a raised platform in the center of the room. Its lid was thrown open, wide open, and inside was a body. But it wasn't lying down as I expected. The corpse was sitting upright. Its mouth was open, frozen in a silent scream. Its eyes were wide, glassy, staring straight at me. The skin was pale and cracked, the color of old parchment, but the posture was unnervingly lifelike. I stumbled back, heart pounding so hard I could barely hear anything else. I could almost feel its gaze drilling into me. The banging resumed, this time inside my chest, and I didn't hesitate. I turned and ran. As I sprinted across the gravel path toward the security office, I heard footsteps behind me, heavy, slow, deliberate. I dared a glance over my shoulder, nothing but shadows. But the footsteps matched my pace exactly. By the time I reached the office, I was breathless, sweat dripping down my forehead. I barely managed to tell the security team what I'd seen. They grabbed flashlights and lockpicks. We raced back to the mausoleum. When we arrived, the scene had changed. The coffin was closed. The corpse was lying flat, silent, and still. No sign it had ever moved. The mausoleum door was locked again. No damage, no forced entry. We searched everywhere. No vandals, no signs of anyone hiding. Just empty, cold stone. That night, sleep was impossible. I kept hearing that banging in my mind, the echo of footsteps behind me. Though when I turned, no one was there. I told my supervisor everything. He listened, face grave, and said the management would seal the mausoleum shut for safety. Steel plates covered the gates, bolted tight. No one was allowed near it anymore. But the banging didn't stop. Neighbors nearby started calling the office, reporting noises, sharp knocks that rattled windows, loud enough to wake them in the middle of the night. Dogs barked, windows shook. Even though the mausoleum was sealed, the sound came from inside. I couldn't let it go. The mausoleum became an obsession for me. I started researching the family buried there, the ones who built it, the people in the coffin. It turned out the mausoleum belonged to the Darwishes, a wealthy family from the early 1900s. The coffin was supposed to hold one Abdul Darwish, a businessman who died under mysterious circumstances nearly 80 years ago. Some said he was a cruel man, feared in the community. Others whispered about curses, family disputes, and a scandal that tore the family apart. Locals talked about strange happenings around the mausoleum long before I started working there. Strange lights, eerie noises, shadows moving in the night. One story stuck with me. A servant who had worked for the family claimed Abdul's body was never at peace, that on some nights his spirit would rise and walk the halls, angry and restless. I talked to some of the older groundskeepers who worked before me. They confirmed the stories. They told me about a time when they found the coffin lid open, but no one dared speak of what they saw inside. One old man warned me, eyes haunted, "Don't go poking around where the dead don't want you." But I couldn't stay away. One night, after my shift ended, I sneaked back to the cemetery. The gates were locked, but I found a gap in the fence and slipped inside. With a flashlight and a mix of fear and curiosity, I crept to the mausoleum. I pressed my ear to the iron gate, nothing at first. Then a soft thump, thump, thump. The banging. I found a small gap and peered inside. The coffin lid was slightly ajar. I swallowed hard, my heart pounding like a drum. Suddenly the lid slammed shut. I jumped back, breath caught in my throat. I ran back through the gravel paths, the banging chasing me in my mind. Since then, the banging has become a part of the neighborhood's strange folklore. Some say the mausoleum is cursed, haunted by Abdul's angry spirit. Others say the banging is a warning, a message from beyond, something trying to escape. The cemetery management refuses to reopen it, but every now and then I swear I hear those footsteps behind me. Heavy, steady, waiting. Story 3. It started with a dare. The kind that seems harmless when you're with friends, but turns into something far more unsettling when you're alone. We were hanging out late one evening, sitting around in a circle like teenagers do, throwing out challenges just to see who would back down first. They said I was too cautious, too scared of the dark, too afraid of old ghost stories and graveyards. So when someone suggested I go to the city cemetery by myself after midnight, I laughed it off at first, but they were serious. "Just go," they said. "Take a picture, prove you're not scared." The pressure was on. I didn't want to look weak, so I agreed. I told myself it would be easy. Just a quick walk through the cemetery, a few photos, and then back home. Nothing to it. That night, I dressed in my jacket and grabbed my phone. The streets were empty and quiet as I approached the cemetery gates. The iron was cold beneath my fingers as I pushed them open. The night air was thick and heavy, the moon obscured behind drifting clouds. and the shadows swallowed everything whole. I switched on my flashlight and began to walk the gravel paths between rows of tombstones. The silence pressed in on me, every step crunching underfoot, seeming far too loud. I tried to keep my nerves in check, telling myself it was just a graveyard, nothing more. Most of the names I passed were unfamiliar, old family names, some dating back a century or more. I stopped occasionally to read the dates carved into the stone, feeling a strange mix of sadness and curiosity. Death had a way of making you feel small, even in the darkest night. Then I saw it, my breath caught in my throat. There, standing before me like a cruel joke carved in stone, was a gravestone with my full name on it. Not just my first name, not just my last, my full name. The exact same spelling, the same order, even the middle name. My heart pounded so loudly I could hear it in my ears. My hands shook as I reached out to touch the cold stone. Below my name was a date. The date of death. The very next day. I blinked, certain it was some kind of trick. Maybe a prank someone had pulled, an elaborate joke to scare me silly. But the stone was real, solid, and the letters were sharp and deeply carved. It was impossible to ignore. I felt my throat tighten, a cold sweat broke out across my skin. The world spun for a moment, and I dropped my flashlight. I didn't hesitate, I ran. The gravel crunched beneath my feet, echoing wildly in the silent night as I sprinted toward the gates. My chest burned, lungs heaving as I stumbled out of the cemetery and into the street. I didn't stop until I was safely inside my apartment, the door locked behind me with trembling hands. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that gravestone. I saw my name, the date looming closer. I tried to convince myself it was a hallucination, that I must have dreamed it. But the image was burned into my mind. I thought about calling my friends, confronting them to see if they'd done some cruel prank. But deep down, I didn't want to hear the answer. The next morning, the sun felt heavy and oppressive. I debated going to work, feeling sick and unsteady. Eventually, I forced myself to get ready, convinced I'd shake this off. But fate had other plans. I was driving to work, the city streets alive with morning traffic, when it happened. A truck came speeding out of nowhere, swerving violently into my lane. I slammed on my brakes and honked, heart racing. The truck driver's eyes were wild, panicked. There wasn't enough time. The crash was brutal. My car spun out of control and smashed into a tree. The world went black. When I woke up in the hospital, doctors told me I was lucky to be alive. The impact should have killed me instantly, but I'd survived. In the quiet hours alone in my hospital room, a chilling thought crept in. I hadn't been driving when the accident happened, because the night before, after the nightmare in the cemetery, I'd called in sick. I'd stayed home. If I'd gone to work as usual, I would have been on the road. And the crash? Well, the crash would have been fatal. The date on that gravestone was real. It was a warning. It saved my life. When I finally felt strong enough, I returned to the cemetery. I wanted to find that grave, to see the stone with my name on it, to understand what had happened. But it was gone. No matter how many times I searched, no matter how many times I asked the groundskeepers or looked through the old maps, there was no record, no grave, no name. Since then, I've tried to make sense of it all. Was it a glimpse of the future? A curse? A gift from some otherworldly force? I don't know. But I do know this: I never went back to that cemetery at night. And I never will. Sometimes, late at night, when the wind is just right, I swear I hear my name whispered in the darkness, and I remember that gravestone, the one that saved me. Thanks for watching Mr. Dark Horror Stories. Have you ever seen something in a graveyard that you can't explain? Share your experience in the comments. And don't forget, Like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because in a place meant for the dead, the living aren't always welcome.